2015. Jules Abbot. There was something you wanted to tell me, wasn't there? What was it you were trying to say? I feel like I drifted out of this conversation a long time ago. Well, you've got my attention now. When they came to tell me, I was angry. When 2 police officers turned up on my doorstep and told me what you'd done, that you'd been in the water, I was angry. Angry and afraid. I knew you'd done this to spite me, to get my attention, to drag me back to where you wanted me. And there you go, Nell. You've succeeded. Here I am in the place I never wanted to come back to look after your daughter, to sort out your bloody mess.
Monday, 10th of August. Josh Whittaker. Something woke me up. The clock said 4:08. I got out of bed and I noticed Mum and Dad's door was open, and Mum wasn't in bed. I went downstairs, but she wasn't there. I think she goes to walk by the river or to visit Katie's grave. Katie got up in the middle of the night and went to the river, but she didn't come back. I sat on the sofa, but I must have fallen asleep because when I heard the door go, it was light. The clock said 7. Mum ran straight upstairs. I followed. She was by the bed, shaking Dad, saying, "Alec, wake up. Nell Abbott is dead. They found her in the water. She jumped." Dad sat up. "How'd you know?" "I went to get the milk," she said. "Everyone was talking about it." "You're lying." I wanted to say, but I couldn't because my parents were looking at each other and they looked happy.
Tuesday, 11th of August. Jules. The nearer I got to Beckford, the more the newsreel of memories burned into my brain. Dad carrying me, squealing with delight into the water when I was 4 or 5. You jumping from the rocks into the river. Picnics on the bank. Mum in the kitchen making porridge. Later, when we were older, you sneaking out late to meet a boy. The boy. I remember a game of football. All eyes on me. Blinking back tears. Blood on my thigh. Laughter ringing in my ears. I can still hear it. I was so deep in thought that I didn't realize I'd arrived. I turned towards the mill house, my heart beating dangerously fast as I pulled onto the driveway. I could hear the water, and the sound transported me back in time again. I pushed open the front door, half expecting to hear my mother's voice calling from the kitchen. But inside was all you. What used to be a snug had become your studio. It was filled with camera equipment, screens, papers piled up on the floor. And pictures, of course. Your photographs covering the walls. Images of the drowning pool, over and over, from every conceivable vantage point, pale and icy in winter, the cliff black and stark, or sparkling in the summer, an oasis lush and green. I felt as though I were there, standing at the top of the cliff looking down into the water, feeling that terrible thrill, the temptation of oblivion.
Nicky Sage. Some of them went into the water willingly, and some didn't. And if you ask Nicky, not that anyone ever did, Nell Abbott went in fighting. Nicky kept herself to herself these days. Just did a few séances over the summer. She had a flat above the grocery shop. She sat in the window and watched all the comings and goings of Beckford. And if she didn't see, she felt. Even before the lights had started flashing blue on the bridge, she'd felt something. She didn't know it was Nell Abbott, not at first. All she knew was that someone had gone swimming again. But when they said it was Nell Abbott, Nicky knew the second one wasn't like the first. She thought of telling Detective Inspector Sean Townsend then and there, but as nice a young man as he was still a copper and his father's son, and he couldn't be trusted. The fact that it was Nell in the water had given her a bit of a turn. She felt bad. She wondered whether she'd said too much, but she couldn't be blamed for starting all this. Nell Abbot was already playing with fire. She was obsessed with the river and its secrets. And that kind of obsession never ends well.
Jules. Upstairs. I hesitated outside the master bedroom. I knew what they told me, but I also knew you. I felt sure that when I opened the door, there you would be, tall and thin, and not at all pleased to see me. But the room was empty. Nell? Silence answered me. Further down the hall was my room. I never slept well in this room. Not surprising, given how you like to terrify me. Painting symbols on the back of my door in red nail polish, writing the names of dead women in the condensation on the window, and then there were those stories you told, of witches dragged to the water, of desperate women flinging themselves from the cliffs, of a terrified little boy who watched his mother jump to her death. Next door was your old room, the place which, by the look of it, is now your daughter's. A chaotic mess of clothes and books, a lug of stale smoke in the air. And then I heard your voice, a dagger in my chest. What the hell do you think you're doing here? I turned. I knew you weren't really gone. And there you stood, in the doorway. But of course it wasn't you. It was your daughter, Lena, who looks exactly like you did as a teenager. The police are downstairs, she said, and she stalked off down the hall. She's not what I expected. I'd imagined a child, distraught, desperate for comfort. But she's 15 and almost grown, and as for seeking comfort, she didn't seem to need it at all, or at least not from me. She is your daughter, after all. The detectives were waiting in the kitchen, a tall man with a dusting of salt and pepper stubble on his face, and a younger woman. Detective Inspector Sean Townsend, the man said, and as I shook his hand I noticed he had a slight tremor. "Erin Morgan," said the young woman. "DS Morgan will keep you informed about the investigation." "Investigation?" DS Morgan nodded. "Preliminary evidence suggests that your sister's body had been in the river just a few hours. She was fully clothed, and her injuries were consistent with a fall from the cliffs." "You think she fell?" I asked. I looked from the detective to Lena, who was standing by the door. "You don't think she fell, do you?" Lena said. "You know better than that."
Lena Abbot. They were all staring at me, and I wanted to tell them to get out of our house. My house. I was trying to keep my mouth shut, but when they said Mum fell, I just got angry. She didn't fall, she jumped. You know she was obsessed with the pool, with everyone who died there. Even she knows that, I said, looking at Julia. Part of me wanted to tell them everything, but I don't think they're capable of understanding. Sean, Detective Townsend, as I'm supposed to call him when it's official business, started asking Julia questions. When did she speak to my mother last? What was her state of mind then? I've not spoken to her in years, she said. Liar. I wanted to slap her then. I wanted to say, this is your fault too. I knew I was going to start crying, so I went to my room.
Mark Henderson. Mark went upriver to swim. Today was a good day. Yesterday they found Nell Abbot dead in the water. He felt as though a vice, one that had been threatening his sanity, had at last been loosened. A young policewoman had come to the house. He told the truth. He told her he'd spoken to Nell Abbot outside the pub on Sunday evening. He'd said they'd spoken about her daughter, who was one of his pupils. True, though not the whole truth. But the detective seemed satisfied. As he dressed, he felt the vice tighten a little once more. The girl could still cause problems. Although, since she'd been quiet this long, it didn't seem likely that she'd break her silence now. Say what you like about Lena Abbot. She was loyal. She kept her word. As he stood there, he saw a woman approaching, and his heart beat harder in his chest. Louise.
Louise Whittaker. Mark Henderson was standing on the riverbank. "Mrs. Whittaker, how are you?" he said. She smiled faintly. She saw he was embarrassed. She'd never realised before how awkward grief was. Everyone wanted to put it behind them, and there you were, blocking the path, dragging the body of your dead child behind you. "You heard about Lena's mother?" she said. "Yes. Such a shock." He paused. "I mean, I know you and she didn't exactly see eye to eye," Louise offered. She toyed with the chain around her neck, pulling the charm, a blue bird, back and forth. "No, we didn't. She was damned if she was going to stand by the river and pretend she was unhappy that Nell Abbot had met her end in it. At least now, what she was writing, the book, it won't be published, will it?" he said. Louise looked at him. "You think so? A woman writing a book about people who died in the drowning pool becomes one of the drowned herself? I'd say someone would want to publish it." Mark looked horrified. "But Lena, she wouldn't." "Who knows?" Louise patted him on the arm. "I need to be getting back." "I'm very sorry, Mrs. Whittaker," he said. And she was touched to see that there were tears in his eyes. As Louise approached the ridge, she saw a group of girls on the road, and at their centre was Lena Abbot. She turned away, but the girl ran after her. "Mrs. Whittaker, I want to talk to you." "Not now, Lena. I'm sorry." Lena put her hand on Louise's arm, but Louise pulled away. She couldn't look at her. She could not look at the child without thinking, why not you? Why weren't you in the water, Lena? Why my Katie? It should have been you.
The Drowning Pool by Daniel Abbott. Unpublished. Prologue. When I was 17, I saved my sister from drowning. But that's not where all this started. There are people who are drawn to water, and I believe I am one of them. Since I moved to Beckford in 2008, I have swum in the river almost every day. But I became obsessed with the Beckford pool long before that. My mother was a storyteller. It was from her that I first heard the tragic stories of the people who met their deaths in this pool. As an adult, I decided to try to make sense of the Beckford stories and write down all the last moments as I imagined them of the women who went to the drowning pool. Over the centuries, it has claimed the lives of Libby Seaton, Lauren Slater, Anne Ward, Katie Whittaker, and more. Countless others. Some say the women left something of themselves in the water, and the desperate, the unhappy, the lost, come here to swim with their sisters.
Erin Morgan. It's a weird place, Beckford. It's beautiful, but it's strange. D.I. Townsend's a bit odd too. He's a local boy, so I suppose it's to be expected. I first saw him yesterday morning when they pulled Nell Abbott's body out of the water. He was standing on the riverbank, the dead woman at his feet, and from a distance it looked as though he was praying, like a priest. And when I introduced myself, there was a slight tremor in his hands. But I was keeping my head down. I'd been transferred up north from London thanks to an ill-advised relationship with a junior colleague. I just wanted to get on with my work. I glanced down at the dead woman. "Her name is Danielle Abbott," Townsend said. "She lives locally. She's a writer and photographer. Nell has a daughter, 15 years old. So no, I don't think it's likely she jumped." We went up the cliff together. The science officer, pale-faced and hairy, had little news. No blood, weapon, or sign of a struggle. Her camera's damaged, though. "Camera?" Hairy turned to me. "She set up a motion-activated camera as part of her project." Townsend sighed. "It doesn't necessarily mean anything. Her equipment's been vandalised before." He peered over the edge. "There's another one lower down, isn't there?" "Yeah, it might show her going in, but it won't tell us what happened up here." More than 24 hours had passed since then. I took Jules, not Julia, apparently, to do the ID at the hospital, and then dropped her back at the mill house. As I crossed the bridge, I saw Lena arguing with someone, a woman. Lena grabbed her arm, but the woman pulled away and went on up the hill. I wanted to talk to Lena, so I called out to her. She insisted there was nothing wrong, that it was none of my business, and told me to clear off. So I drove back to the station and gave Townsend the lowdown on Jules Abbot's identification. She asked about a bracelet. Apparently, Nell had a bracelet that belonged to their mother, which she wore all the time. Townsend nodded. There's no sign of one in her belongings. Ask Lena about it. I was planning to. I described the encounter on the bridge. Louise Whittaker, he said. And she is... He sighed. You should have been given the background on all this. He tapped at his computer. You should also read Nell Abbot's manuscript. A book about Beckford. A local history. He exhaled sharply. Of sorts. Nell Abbot's spin on things. One of the cases she wrote about was Katie Whittaker, who took her own life in June. Katie was a close friend of Lena Abbot, and Louise, her mother, was once friendly with Nell. They fell out, apparently, over the focus of Nell's work, and then when Katie died, Louise blamed her. So, should I talk to this Louise? I'll do it. His eyes remained on the screen. I was the DI on the investigation into her daughter's death. So 2 women have died in that river this year, I said. How many have died, in total? He looked up. How far would you like to go back? Like I said, weird.
Jules. They asked me to do the identification. Lena volunteered, but they told her no. And I wanted to see you, because I knew I wouldn't be able to believe you were gone until I did. You lay on a gurney, a sheet covering your body. You were still and beautiful. Perfect. And then it struck me. You jumped. You jumped. You never would. That's not the way to do it. You told me that. The cliff's not high enough. If you really mean it, you don't jump, you dive. What does that mean now? I took your hand. Please don't touch her. DS Morgan was standing behind me. Where are her things? They'll be returned to you. There should be a bracelet, I said quietly. A silver bracelet with an onyx clasp. It belonged to my mum. She wore it all the time. I looked down at you. I wanted to touch you again. I felt sure I could wake you up. I whispered your name. Yet there seemed to be no sound at all. What did you want to tell me?
Lena. It should have been me. I'm her next of kin, the person who loved her, but they wouldn't allow me to go. I was left alone with nothing to do but sit in an empty house and smoke. And then I went out. I was near the bridge when I saw Louise. I caught up with her and said I wanted to talk to her. I grabbed her arm, but she pulled away, saying, "Not now, Lena, I'm sorry." I wanted to say, "You lost your daughter and I lost my mother. Doesn't that make us even? Can't you just forgive me now?" I didn't, though. And then that clueless policewoman came along, so I told her where to go and went back home. I lay on my bed until I heard the front door go. Eventually, I went downstairs. She was in the kitchen, standing at the stove. "Did you see her?" She looked up. Yes. She looked like herself. She stirred the contents of a pan. "Do you like spaghetti bolognese?" "I do, but I just said, 'Why did you lie to the police?'" She looked up. "I didn't lie." "Yes, you did. You said you hadn't spoken to her in years, but she phoned you all the time." "Not all the time. And in any case, we didn't talk. This is your fault, you know. She needed to talk to you. She was unhappy. She didn't even swim anymore." She didn't say anything. She just stood there. "You didn't know her at all. You didn't understand her." I left the house. I kept thinking of Mum talking into the phone and the silence on the other end. Cold bitch.
Jules, my fault. How was this my fault? If you were unhappy now, you never said. But if you told me you'd stopped swimming, I would have known something was wrong. Swimming was essential to your sanity. That's what you told me. I went upstairs and lay on the bed and dialed into my voicemail. You have 7 saved messages. The most recent one came last Tuesday. "Julia, it's me. I need you to call me back, please. Julia, it's important. As soon as you can, all right? Bye." I listened to the message over and over. And now I could hear that you were afraid. What were you afraid of? Who were you afraid of? I never understood you, Nell. I haven't known you since we were teenagers. You 17, me 13. Since that night when, like an axe swung into wood, we were cleaved apart. But it wasn't until 6 years later that you split us up for good. It was at the wake. Our mother just buried you and I smoking in the garden. Someone called out, "You girls okay? Drowning your sorrows." Drowning, drowning. You repeated. You were drunk. Julia, do you ever think about it? Think about what? That night. Have you ever talked to anyone about it? You grabbed my hand. Come on, Julia. Tell me honestly. Wasn't there some part of you that liked it? After that, I stopped speaking to you. But that didn't stop you from calling. You left messages telling me about your work, your daughter, an award you had won. Sometimes you were cryptic, other times angry, sometimes hyper. Come to the mill house, please. You'll love it. All I wanted was to forget Beckford, to forget you. I pulled open the drawer of the bedside table. There were postcards, an old-fashioned silver cigarette lighter with the initials LS engraved on the side. LS. A lover? Men never seemed that important to you. But there was one, though, wasn't there? A long time ago. When you were a teenager, you used to sneak out of the mill house at night and he'd be waiting for you. Robbie Cannon. And thinking of Robbie made me feel something I hadn't felt in a while. Shame. It was August, 1993. Mum bought me a new swimming costume. It had a 1950s look to it, the sort of thing Marilyn might wear. But fat and pale, I was no Norma Jean. The biggest crowd gathered at the drowning pool. The boys jumped off rocks and the girls sunbathed, music played and barbecues were lit. That day I walked to the river alone. My stomach ached. Nell's friends were already there, and Robbie, of course. I sat apart from everyone. I put my towel under the trees and lay on my side and read my book. The boys had a football and they started to have a kickabout. Then I felt it, a stinging smack against my thigh. They were all laughing. Robbie ran over and picked up the ball. Sorry, he said, grinning. I went back to my book. The ball hit a tree just a few feet away from me. It happened again, and then again. They were aiming at me. Target practice. The girls were helpless with laughter, Nell's shrieks of mirth loudest of all. "Stop it!" one of the girls shouted. "You've hurt her, she's bleeding." I looked down. There was blood on my thigh. I knew right away. They hadn't hurt me. The stomach cramps. I was bleeding heavily. I wrapped my towel around my waist and hobbled back along the path. I could hear everyone laughing. That night I went into the water. I'd been drinking. My first experience with alcohol. Other things happened too. Robbie came to find me. He told me I needn't feel ashamed. But I went down to the drowning pool anyway, and Nell dragged me out. She slapped my face hard. "You stupid fat bitch! What have you done? What are you trying to do?"
Wednesday, 12th of August. Patrick Townsend. The Wards' cottage hadn't belonged to the Wards in almost 100 years. It didn't seem to belong to anyone anymore. But Patrick had a key, so that made him feel proprietorial. He'd fitted a lock some years back, and he kept the place tidy. Only sometimes the door was left open, and Patrick could no longer be certain he had locked it. He'd begun to feel moments of confusion lately, which filled him with dread. He walked upriver to the cottage most days. It was part of his routine. Sometimes he'd fish for a while. This morning, however, he'd woken with an ache in his leg, so he decided to take the car. And then he remembered that it was still at the garage. He hobbled across the courtyard to ask his daughter-in-law if he could borrow hers. Sean's wife, Helen, was in the kitchen. In term time, she'd be gone by now. She was head teacher at the school. But even in the school holidays, she wasn't one for a lie-in. "Can I make you coffee?" He said he'd take some in a flask, explaining that he wanted to go upriver. "Don't go near the pool, Dad. I think—" He shook his head. "No. How's Sean getting on with all that?" She shrugged. "He doesn't really say." When he reached the cottage, Patrick saw that the door was slightly ajar. Inside, he found the bed unmade. Wine-stained glasses stood on the floor, and a condom floated in the toilet. There were other things, too. Bits of clothing and a bracelet. He tied it up and dumped everything in the boot of the car, and put the bracelet in the glove compartment. By the time he got back to the house, it was late morning. Patrick spotted the tabby, the stray that Helen had been feeding, moving lazily across the courtyard. Its belly was swollen, pregnant. He'd have to do something about that.
Thursday, 13th of August. Erin. D.I. Townsend called the briefing just after 9. There was just the young constable, Callie, Harry, the science guy, and me. Townsend had seen the coroner's report. Nell died due to injuries sustained in the fall. She didn't drown. She had 3 or 4 glasses of alcohol in her blood. Callie told us that Nell left the pub around 7 on the Sunday evening. She was at the mill house until at least 10:30 when Lena went to bed. No one reported seeing her after that. Harry's testimony was interesting. It demonstrated that Jules Abbot was a liar, for starters. Nell's phone records showed she'd made 11 calls to her sister's phone over the past 3 months. None of them was particularly long, but they weren't hang-ups either. He'd established the time of death, too. The camera down on the rocks had picked up a sudden blur of movement at 2:30. "And we got a print off the damaged camera," he said. Townsend nodded. "I'll have a word with Julia Abbott about those phone calls." He closed the briefing and I walked outside with him. There was a woman coming towards us, muttering to herself. She looked like an elderly goth. "Hello, Nicky," Sean said. The woman stopped. "Humph. Getting anywhere? Finding out who pushed her?" "Who pushed her?" I repeated. "Daniel Abbott. Do you have any information, Mrs. Who's this when she's at home?" she asked Sean. "This is DS Morgan, Nicky. Do you have something you'd like to tell us about the other night?" "I didn't see anything," she grumbled, and she continued on her way. "Don't take Nicky Sage too seriously," Sean said. "She says she talks to the dead."
Jules. I was in the kitchen when D.I. Townsend came to the house. Lena showed him in. He and I sat down at the table while Lena stood by the window. "The post-mortem has been completed," he said softly. "Nell was killed by the fall. There's no indication that anyone else was involved. There was alcohol in her blood, enough to impair her judgment, to make her unsteady. But Nell was as sure-footed as a goat on that cliff," I said, "and she could handle more than a few glasses of wine." "It wasn't an accident," Lena said sharply. "She didn't jump," I snapped back. "Why are you even here?" She stalked out of the room, slamming the door. D.I. Townsend cleared his throat. "Miss Abbott, it's Jules. Jules. Nell's phone records reveal that in the past 3 months alone, she made 11 calls to your phone. Why lie to us?" "I didn't lie. I never spoke to her. She left messages. I didn't respond. I just... Here." I held out my mobile phone. "Listen for yourself." My hands were trembling, and as he reached for the phone, so were his. "He listened to your final message. Why would you not call her back?" he said. "She sounded upset. I don't know. She sounded like Nell. Sometimes she was happy, sometimes sad. Didn't mean anything. Do you have the other messages?" I didn't, not all of them, but he listened to the ones I had. "Don't erase those, we may need them." Then he got to his feet and left. I sat and cried. "I may not have loved you, but I can't have you abandoned like this. Dismissed. I want to know if someone hurt you, and why." I want them to pay. I wiped my eyes. There were times when I could have happily strangled you. Who else did you make murderous? In your study, I began to sift through your papers. I retrieved files containing medical records. A birth certificate for Lena, with no father named. I'd known that, of course. This was one of your secrets. There were pictures of the town centre, the bridge, the pub, the church, the graveyard. Libby Seaton's grave. Poor Libby. You were obsessed with her when you were younger. You always wanted to hear the story of how Libby, still a child, was accused of witchcraft and brought to the water to sink or swim. I slid my hand into my jeans pocket and pulled out the silver lighter. LS. Is this for Libby? Really, Nell? Were you so obsessed with the 300-year-long dead girl that you had her initials engraved on your belongings? I returned to the pages looking for more about Libby. There were names I'd heard of and names I hadn't. Libby and Mary, Anne and Katie and Ginny and Lauren, and there, at the top of Lauren's page, you had written, Beckford is not a suicide spot. Beckford is a place to get rid of troublesome women.
Monday, 17th August. Nicky. Nicky was dressed in black, ready for the funeral. But first she went to the pool, a slow shuffle along the path. When she reached the little beach, she took off her sandals and paddled in the water. Nicky had been standing here the first time she ever laid eyes on Nell Abbot. It was a couple of years back. She'd been having a paddle when she spotted a woman up on the cliff with a camera. She saw her quite a bit after that. She was at the pool a lot, taking pictures, making sketches, writing things down. And she swam at dawn and dusk in winter and summer. Though now she thought of it, Nicky hadn't seen her swim in the river lately. She tried to remember the last time, but she couldn't, thanks to her sister chattering in her ear, clouding her mind's eye. Throughout childhood, people said Jeanie was a good girl. And then she turned 17 and she joins the police. The police! It was a betrayal. Bloody big mouth on her, that was Jeanie's trouble. She didn't know when to keep it shut. After she quit the police and before she left Beckford, Jean told Nicky a story to make her hair stand on end. And ever since, Nicky had been spitting in the dirt, murmuring her invocations to protect herself every time Patrick Townsend crossed her path. So far it had worked. She was protected. Not Jeanie, though. After that business with Patrick and his wife, she drank herself to death. But Nicky still spoke to her. She'd been chattering more than ever since Nell Abbot went in. Nicky had liked Nell, liked the fact that she listened to her stories. She listened, but she didn't heed her warnings, did she? Nell was another one who didn't know when to keep her mouth shut. Nicky walked slowly back along the path and sat down on a bench opposite the churchyard. She wasn't going in. The church was no place for her. But she wanted to watch the mourners. The young policewoman was there first. She was a watcher too. She saw the folk from the pub, several teachers from the school. The handsome one had sunglasses covering his eyes. She saw the Whittakers, all three of them, misery rising off them like steam from a pot. Helen Townsend, followed by her husband, and then the old man, Patrick Townsend, pillar of the community, ex-copper, scum. Nicky spat on the ground and said her invocation. Jeanie whispered, "Look away, Nick."
Helen Townsend. Helen sat at the kitchen table and cried noiselessly. "You don't have to go," Sean said. "She does," said Patrick. "We all do." Helen wasn't upset about the funeral. She was upset because Patrick had drowned the tabby that morning. When Sean went upstairs, Patrick came over to her. "Look, love, I know it's difficult for you, but this isn't about grieving for Nell Abbot. This is about putting all that business behind us." "Patrick," she looked up at him. "Dad, I need to talk to you about the car, about..." But Sean was coming down the stairs. "About what?" Patrick frowned. "Never mind. It doesn't matter." She went upstairs and washed her face. She didn't want to admit, even to herself, that she was afraid. She'd found something in the glove box of her car, something she couldn't explain, and she wasn't sure she wanted an explanation. She'd taken it and hidden it, stupidly, in the desk in her office. "Are you ready?" Sian was calling. She took a deep breath. "I'm ready," she said to herself.
Lena. On the back of my bedroom door was the dress I was going to wear. It's Mum's from Lambin. She'd never in a million years let me wear it, but today I didn't think she'd mind. The last time I had been in her room was last Sunday afternoon. I was bored and feeling sad about Katie, so I went to look for some weed. I wasn't expecting her home, but she came in and caught me. "Why are you looking to get wasted?" she asked. "Go for a swim or call a friend." I lost it with her. "What friend? Don't you remember what happened to my best friend?" She went really quiet, but I didn't back off. I was yelling about how she left me alone all the time, how she was so distant. "I'm sorry if I've been distracted," she said, "but there's something I need to do." I was cold with her. "You don't need to do anything, Mum. Haven't you done enough already? Leanie," she was saying, "I'm the parent here. You have to trust me." I said some shitty things then, about what kind of parent leaves dope lying around and brings men home at night so that I can hear. I told her that if it had been me who'd been in trouble like Katie was, Louise would have helped. And it was all bullshit, of course, because I was the one who didn't want Mum to say anything. And then she said that she had tried to help. And then I just started screaming at her, telling her everything was her fault, that if she blabbed to anyone I would leave and never speak to her again. I said it over and over. "You've done enough damage." The last thing I ever said to her was that it was her fault Katie was dead.
Jules, it was hot, the day of your funeral. The church was full. Lena and I sat side by side at the front. She looked very beautiful, much older than her 15 years, in a black crepe dress. The vicar talked about your life. He listed your achievements. He spoke of your devotion to your daughter. I was mentioned in passing. I was the one who had given the information, so I suppose I couldn't complain. The service finished abruptly, and before I knew it, Lena was on her feet. I followed her along the aisle, trying not to see the faces around me, but then I stopped, suddenly. I didn't breathe, couldn't swallow, my insides turning to liquid. It was him, at the back of the church. Older, uglier, but unmistakable, a violent man. I waited for him to turn his eyes on me, but he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at Lena. My insides turned to ice. I started towards him, a noise rising in my throat. People looked at me. I needed to get to him. And then he turned abruptly and walked away. He walked quickly out into the car park. I stood, adrenaline making my head swim. He climbed into a car and was gone. "Jules, are you all right?" DS Morgan appeared at my side. "Did you see him?" I asked her. She looked around. "Who?" "He is a violent man." I wanted to say, "I remember him. I know what he's capable of." "Who did you see?" "Robbie." I said his name at last. Robbie Cannon. August 1993. After the football game, I returned home and had a bath. Then I lay on my bed, suffocating with misery, self-pity mingled with guilt, because my mother lay in the next room and she was dying, and all I could think of was how much I didn't want to live. I fell asleep. My father woke me. He was taking my mother to the hospital for tests, and they were staying the night in town. Nell was at home. I could hear her music in the next room. Later, the music stopped, and then I could hear voices, and other noises too, moaning. I went out into the corridor. The door next to Nell's room was slightly ajar. I could hear Nell saying his name, and I could see their shapes moving in the darkness. I crept downstairs into the kitchen. There was a bottle of vodka, half full, on the counter. I copied what I'd seen Nell do. I poured myself a glass of orange juice and topped it up with vodka. I took a sip, and it was sweet. I finished the drink and poured another. I enjoyed the physical sensation, my blood heating up, that afternoon's misery ebbing away. I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. I slipped into the living room and crouched on the window seat. I saw him go into the kitchen. I heard the glug of liquid, and then I saw him as he walked past. And then he stopped, took a step back. "Julia?" I didn't say anything, didn't breathe. But he turned the light on, and there he stood, in boxer shorts. He smiled at me. "Are you okay? Why are you sitting in the dark?" He caught sight of my glass and smiled. I thought the vodka was looking low. He clinked his glass against mine and sat down at my side. I started to get up, but he put his hand on my arm. "Don't run off. I wanted to apologise for this afternoon. I'm really sorry, okay?" I nodded. "It's nothing to be ashamed of." I cringed. My whole body burned with shame. "Where's Nell?" I asked. "Sleeping. Think I wore her out." He pulled my body closer to his. "Have you ever kissed a guy, Julia?" He turned my face to his, and I felt his tongue push into my mouth. I pulled away, but he kissed me again, and his hand slid along my thigh. I wriggled, mortified, as I felt his fingers pushing against the fat of my belly. "No." I thought I'd cried out, but it was more like a whisper. He got angry afterwards because I wouldn't stop crying. "Oh, come on, Julia. Didn't you think it was nice? I didn't hurt you. Stop crying, Julia. I thought you'd be grateful."
2015. Sean. I drove Helen and my father home after the funeral, and then I said I needed to go back to the station. I'm a coward. I owe my father more than this, today of all days, and yet I couldn't sit with him. I couldn't meet his eye. I drove, not to the station, but back to the churchyard. My mother was cremated. She isn't here. My father took her ashes to a special place. I used to ask about it, but it always upset him, so after a while I let it be. There have been times in my life when I've barely thought of my mother, but lately she's been in my thoughts more and more. Her face comes to me. Sometimes she's smiling, sometimes not. Sometimes she reaches for me. I sat there for a while thinking of my mother, and then set off for the village shop. I bought a bottle of whiskey. My father likes it. I thought we could share a glass together, but the mere imagining of it made me fearful, and my hands started to shake.
The Drowning Pool by Jules Abbot. Unpublished. Lauren, 1983. For Lauren's 32nd birthday in a week's time, they would go to Craster. Just her and Sean. "There's a castle and a beautiful beach," she told her son, "and we can go to the smokehouse and eat kippers. Heaven." "I'd rather go to Disneyland," Sean said. In the end, they didn't do either. 3 days before her birthday, there was a storm at night. Lauren's husband and son slept like babies, but Lauren was awake. She sat at her husband's desk, a bottle of his whiskey at her elbow, trying to write a note to him. She drank a glass and then another, but the page remained blank. "Dear" sounded dismissive, and "dearest" a lie. With the bottle almost empty and the page still unmarked, she walked out into the storm and made her way to the pool. She clambered up to the cliff and waited. She prayed that the man she loved might somehow sense her despair and come to save her. But the voice she heard, calling her name, was not the one she wanted to hear. And so she stepped up onto the precipice and pitched herself forward. There was no way she could have known that her boy was down there, behind the tree line.
Tuesday, 18th August. Louise. Today was going to be a bitch. Louise felt that when she woke. The elation that she'd felt at Nell's death, her vengeful satisfaction, was already waning. It was time to move on. Her husband wanted to sell up, move away from Beckford, and she knew he was right. And yet, this was where Katie had taken her first steps, spoken her first words. She stood in Katie's room, fingering the necklace around her neck. Katie had been wearing it when she died, a silver chain with a little blue bird. Louise couldn't fathom why Katie had chosen it. A present from Lena, to whom she no longer seemed particularly close. The bird engraved, most un-Lena-like, with love. She'd worn no other jewellery. Jeans, a jacket, its pockets filled up with stones, a backpack, similarly laden. When they found her, she was clutching flowers like Ophelia, like the picture on Nell Abbott's wall. People said it was ridiculous to lay the blame at Nell Abbott's door, just because Nell had wrote about the pool, because she had said the words, suicide spot. But Katie didn't hang herself from the back of her bedroom door. She chose the pool.
Sean, I was woken by a banging at the door just before midnight. "Do you see this?" Louise Whittaker shouted at me as I opened the door. "I told you, Sean." The "this" to which she referred was an orange drug vial. On the side was the name Danielle Abbott. I ushered her inside. She was hysterical, but eventually she managed to tell what had happened. They were going to put the house on the market, and she'd decided at last to clear out Katie's bedroom. While she was packing away her clothes, she'd found the orange vial in a coat pocket. She'd never heard of the drug, Remato, but she looked it up on the internet and discovered it was a diet pill not legally available in the UK. Studies had linked its use to depression. "You missed it," she cried. "You told me she had nothing in her blood, but Nell Abbott was supplying my daughter with drugs, dangerous drugs, and you let her get away with it." "But Katie's blood tests were negative, Louise. I've no idea how long this Remato stays in the system, but I'll look at Katie's blood tests again. If I missed something, no, it doesn't change anything." Louise was calmer now. "It would just help me to understand."
Wednesday, the 19th of August. Erin. It took the science guy about 5 minutes to find the email receipt for the pills on Nell's computer. Since then, I've been swatting up on Katie Whittaker. Her parents didn't suspect anything was up. Her teachers said that perhaps she'd been a little distracted, but there were no red flags. The only thing was an alleged falling out with her best friend Lena Abbott. Katie's mother said they'd been seeing less of each other, but she didn't think there had been an argument. Her school friends, though, claimed it ended up in them being physically separated by a teacher. I went to see Jules. She looked tired. "I can't sleep," she said. She went into the kitchen and flicked the kettle on. "This Robbie Cannon you were talking about," I said. She chewed on a nail. "We had a look into him. You were right about him being violent. He's got a couple of domestic violence convictions, but he said he hadn't seen your sister in years." I went over to Gateshead, that's where he lives, and I had a chat with him. He said he read about her death in the paper and decided to come and pay his respects. "Did he mention me? Or Lena?" "No, he didn't. Why do you ask?" She didn't reply. I managed to get nothing more out of her on the subject. It was clear she was frightened of him for some reason, but she wouldn't say why. It was unsatisfactory, but I had another awkward subject to raise. I explained about the pills. Oh, God. Nell purchased them in November of last year, on the 18th, from an American website. The 18th? Are you sure? I checked my notes. Yes, why? It's just... that's the anniversary of our mother's death. She frowned. It's odd, because Nell usually called me on the 18th, and last year she didn't. It turned out she was in hospital for an emergency appendectomy. You sure it was the 18th? Back at the station, I checked with Harry. I was right about the date. She could have bought them on her mobile, Callie suggested, but Harry shook his head. No, I've checked the IP address. The purchase was made from a computer using the Millhouse router. Lena, I said to Sean. It's got to be Lena. He nodded, grim-faced. We need to talk to her. We were on our way out of the office when we were waylaid by Callie. Some bright spark decided to take a look at the print on the pill bottle and compare it to the print on the camera, and they match. And it's not Nell Abbott's, and it's not Katie Whittaker's. Someone else handled both those objects. Louise, Sean said. It has to be Louise Whittaker.
Mark was zipping up his suitcase when a detective arrived. "DS Morgan," she said. "Can I have a word?" "I'm packing to go on holiday," he said. He assumed it would be about Nell Abbott. "I'm driving to Edinburgh to pick up my fiancée. We're going to Spain for a few days. It won't take long. It's about Katie Whittaker. Mark felt his pulse quicken. What about? I understand that you intervened in an argument between Katie and Lena about a month before Katie died. Mark struggled to swallow. It wasn't an argument, he said. He held up his hand to shield his eyes from the sun. Sorry, why is all this coming up again? Katie's death was ruled a suicide, I thought. The vice was tightening on his skull. His heart was pounding. He had to get out to the sun. Mr. Henderson, are you all right? Yes, a bit of a headache. That's all. The glare, it's just... It wasn't an argument. Katie and Lena could be excitable and voluble. I'm sorry to bring all this up again, the detective said. Mark was struggling to hear her over the pounding of blood in his ears. But we've been led to believe that Katie was taking a drug. A diet pill. What? Katie wasn't overweight, he said, realising how stupid that sounded. They talk about it all the time, though, don't they? Teenage girls, about their weight. Grown women, too. My fiancé never shuts up about it. True, though not the whole truth, because his fiancé was no longer his fiancé. In her last email, sent some months ago, she told him she'd never forgive him for the way he'd treated her. But what had he done that was so terrible? He wasn't a bad man. It was just that when he loved completely. What was wrong with that? After the detective left, he walked around looking for something he knew he wouldn't find. The night after midsummer, angry and frightened, he'd built a fire in the garden and piled onto it cards and letters. A book. He had eradicated every trace of her. There were pictures, he knew, in the head's office at school. A file, closed now, but still kept. He knew where to look, and he wanted something. He needed something to take with him. He drove to the school and parked in the empty car park. He let himself in and headed up to Helen's office, but the filing cabinet was locked. Taking care not to disturb anything, he searched through Helen's desk drawers one by one, looking for keys. He didn't find them, but he did find something else. A trinket. Something that struck him as vaguely familiar. A silver bracelet with an onyx clasp. He took the bracelet and put it in his pocket. He couldn't explain why. It was, he thought, as though he were in deep water and he was reaching for something, anything to save himself.
Erin, the boy, Josh, was outside the house when we arrived. Is your mum in, Josh? Sean asked him. She was asleep that night. What night, Josh? I asked. He didn't answer. His mother opened the door. She looked from me to Sean and sighed. Off you go, she said to her son. I followed Louise and Sean into the living room. So, Louise said, what have you to tell me? Sean explained that, as before, there were no traces of drugs in Katie's system. Louise shook her head in disbelief. But surely, well, even supplying drugs to someone, to a child, is an offence anyway. From what we've discovered, Mrs. Whittaker, I said, regarding the timing, Nell could not have purchased them. But her face changed as the realisation dawned on her. Lena. We don't know that for sure, Sean explained, until we question her. And there's something we need to ask you, Mrs. Whittaker, I said. Sean shifted uneasily. Louise, we have a matching print from the pill bottle and from one of Nell Abbot's cameras. They're probably Nell's. They're not Nell's and they're not your daughter's, I replied. Of course they're not Katie's. Louise put her hand to the chain around her neck, running the little blue bird back and forth. She sighed. Well, they're mine, of course. It happened 3 days after her daughter died, she told us. I went to Nell's house. I beat on the door, calling out for her. Lena opened the door. She was crying. I said some things to her. Cruel things, I suppose. Nell heard me and she came out and told me to leave them alone. She said... Louise gave a yelping laugh. She said that she was sorry for my loss. But it had nothing to do with her. Lena was on the ground, still crying. We argued, Nell and I. I demanded to see footage from her camera. I didn't want to see it, but I couldn't bear for Nell to be the last one to see my child alive. She told me there was no footage, that the camera wasn't working. She sighed. I didn't believe her. I told her... Lena must have told you all this. I told her I wouldn't rest until I saw her pay for what she'd done. Then I left. I went to the cliff and I tried to get the SD card out of the camera, but I couldn't, so I kicked it a few times. Then I went home. She wouldn't rest until she saw Nell pay, I repeated as we walked to the car. Does that not sound like a threat to you? Sian said nothing. And doesn't it seem odd that Lena didn't even mention it to us? And Josh, the business about his mum being asleep, it was such an obvious lie. I wouldn't set too much store by the tales of grieving children, he said quietly.
Lena, the stupid diet pills. I'd forgotten I'd even bought them. I had to go to the police station with Julia, who is my appropriate adult. That made me laugh. I told the truth. I bought the pills on Mum's credit card because Katie asked me to. But Katie wasn't overweight, Sian said. Well, she wasn't thin. Did people at school say that to her? DS Morgan asked me. No. I tried to keep calm. Katie wasn't being bullied. She wasn't thin, but she liked the way her body looked. Or at least she always used to. And then, I honestly don't know what it was, but she got weird about it. She asked me to buy the pills. I thought the interview was over. But then DS Morgan started asking about the day Louise came round just after Katie died. And I was like, of course, yes, I remember that day. It was one of the worst days of my life. She nodded. When Louise said to your mother that she wouldn't rest until she saw her pay, what do you think she meant? I lost it then. She didn't mean anything, you moron. Lena, Sian glared at me. Well, sorry, but Louise's daughter had just died. She didn't know what she was saying. She was crazy. She was saying all sorts of things. We all were. But Louise didn't hurt Mum. I wanted to tell the whole truth. I really did. But I couldn't. It would have been a betrayal. So I said all I could. Louise didn't do anything to my mother, okay? Mum made her own choice. Julia wanted to drive me home, but I'd seen Josh waiting for me. He looked frightened when he came over. Did they ask you about Mum? No. Well, a little. Why? He wouldn't look at me. I think we should tell. No, Josh, we're not going to tell. We made a promise. He started to cry. But what good does it do now? He was right, in a way. But still, I couldn't betray her. I didn't want to leave Josh like that, so I said, come with me. We walked in silence to the end of the town to where Mark Henderson lived. It had started to rain. What are we doing here? He asked. I just grinned at him. When we were outside Mark's door, I picked up a stone and hurled it against the front window. The whole pane came crashing down. Lena! Josh yelled. Come on, I said, grinning, and I handed him a stone, and together we went around the whole house. It was like we were high on hatred. We were laughing and calling that piece of shit every name we could think of.
The Drowning Pool by Jules Abbot. Unpublished. Katie. Katie walked quickly down the hill. She didn't head straight to the river. She wanted one last time to walk past the place she grew up in, past the school, past the village shop, past the houses of her friends. She stopped from time to time to pick up a stone or a piece of brick, which she put in her backpack. She crossed the river and looked down at the water. On the path to the Drowning Pool, she walked slower, the pack heavy on her back, just 1 foot in front of the other. She cried a little. 1 foot in front of the other. 1 foot in front of the other. Off the path, a stumble down the bank, and then 1 foot in front of the other. Into the water. Jules, I was sitting on the floor in your study, looking through files, reading your notes. You were making up stories. You didn't know what was going through Katie's head when she died. In the police station, I'd listened to the detective ask Lena about how Louise threatened you. Is that what you wanted to tell me? Were you afraid of Louise? I got up and went through to the living room, and I thought I saw someone there on the window seat. Just for a moment, and then she was gone. I poured myself a drink, cold vodka. I drank it quickly. I went back to the study and gathered up the notes. There was a picture of Katie and Lena grinning at the camera. I turned it over. On the reverse you had written, "Sometimes troublesome women take care of themselves." What did it mean? I put it back with the other papers, and then I saw another file. Prologue was written in heavy type, and below that, when I was 17, I saved my sister from drowning. August 1993. Robbie left me, and I drank the rest of the vodka. I wasn't thinking straight, but it felt as though my train of thought made sense. The river is the way out. I'd no idea what I wanted when I stumbled down the lane. It must have taken me a while to get to the pool. I wasn't quick at the best of times, but in the dark, in that state, I'd have been slower still. So you didn't follow, I suppose. But eventually you came. I was in the water by then. I remember the cold around my ankles, and then my knees, and then sinking softly into blackness. I drifted. Somewhere in the distance I heard a woman scream. "Libby," you said. Sometimes at night you can hear her beg. I felt her hand on my hair, and she pulled me deeper. Only witches float. It wasn't Libby, of course. It was you, shouting at me. Your hand on my head, holding me down, or dragging me out. Eventually we were on the bank, me on my knees, gasping for breath, and you standing shouting at me. "You stupid fat bitch, what were you doing?" You fell to your knees and then you smelled the alcohol on me. "You're 13, Julia, you can't drink, you can't..." She shook me hard. "Why are you doing this to me? Why? What have I ever done to you?" You took me home, dragged me upstairs and ran a bath. "It's okay, Julia. I'm sorry I yelled at you. I'm sorry he hurt you, I am, but what did you honestly expect? I wondered how you could be so calm about it. I thought you would have been angrier. You made me swear that I wouldn't tell our parents what had happened. Promise me, Julia, promise me you won't tell anyone about this, okay? Not ever. Nothing happened, okay? Promise me." I kept my promise. You didn't. "2015. Helen. Helen was worried about Patrick. He'd become absent-minded. He would take her car and forget where he'd left it, or sometimes leave junk in it, as he had the other day. Things he'd found? She didn't want to know. She was afraid for him. She was afraid for herself, too. The events of the last year had unsettled her. Last autumn she had discovered that her husband, her solid, steadfast, moral husband, was not all that she'd thought him to be. What was she to do? Leave? Abandon her home and her responsibilities? Patrick persuaded her to stay. He assured her that Sean deeply regretted his infidelity and that he would work to earn her forgiveness. Meanwhile, he'd said, if he would like to take the spare room here, she still slept in her father-in-law's house most nights. Occasionally, Patrick liked to talk about his life, about the town. Sometimes he told her things which disturbed her. Stories of the river, old rumours, nasty tales long buried and now dug up and revived, spread as truth by Nell Abbot. But her lies won't ever see the light of day. I'll see to that, he told her.
Sean, for several days after my mother died, I didn't speak. I don't remember much about that time. I remember the way Dad shocked me out of my silence. He held my hand over a flame until I cried out. It was cruel, but effective. Afterwards, he let me keep the cigarette lighter. I used to carry it with me, but recently I lost it. Erin phoned to say there'd been a disturbance at Mark Henderson's house. Windows had been broken, and a neighbour had seen a young boy leaving the scene. I saw Josh on the bridge, and I went over to him. "Josh, you weren't at Mr. Henderson's house this afternoon, were you?" He looked away. "Don't tell Mum, Mr. Townsend, please." "But Josh, what on earth were you doing?" He started to cry. "Come on, I'll drive you home." "No, Mum will never forgive me." In the end, I took him to the station and made him a cup of tea. "He's frightened and he doesn't want to go home," I told Callie. The words triggered a memory. I was 6 years old and a policewoman was holding my hand. I never know which of my memories are real, but in this one I was shivering and afraid. He's frightened and he doesn't want to go home, my father was saying. Can you take him, Jeannie? That was it. Jeannie. WPC Sage. My phone, ringing, brought me back to myself. Sir? It was Erin. Another neighbour saw a teenage girl running off. Lena, of course. I went back to Josh. We need to get in touch with your parents, I said, but then he started sobbing again. Josh, please tell me what's upsetting you so much. It's about Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson and Katie.
Thursday, 20th of August 2015. Lena. It started as a joke. The thing with Mr. Henderson. A game. Katie and I had played it before with Mr. Fryer and Mr. McIntosh. You just had to get them to blush. With Fryer and McIntosh it was easy. With Mr. Henderson, though, it was another story. Katie went up to his desk and smiled, leaning forward, but he stood up and walked away. When I tried, standing close to him and touching my hair, he yawned. I couldn't get that out of my head. I didn't want to play anymore. It was months later when Josh came to see me on Valentine's Day with a hilarious story. I messaged Katie. KW and MH forever. I got a text back 5 seconds later saying, "Delete that now or I will never talk to you again." Chill, I thought. The next morning, Katie met me before school. "What made you send that text?" I laughed. "Josh told me he saw you and Mr. Henderson holding hands in the car park." But Katie didn't laugh. She started to cry. I just couldn't tell anyone. And then it hit me. Are you actually saying there's something going on?" She just looked at me. "You can't be. That's insane. Katie, you have to stop this before something happens." "Lena, it's already happened. It's been happening since November." I didn't tell the police any of that. They came to the house when Julia and I were eating dinner. I thought it was about the broken window. I held my hands up straight away. "I'll pay for the damage." Jules started clearing away the dishes. Sean sat down. "We'll get to that later. First we need to talk about Mark Henderson and Katie Whittaker." I went cold. He leant forward. "Josh has just told us that Mark Henderson was engaged in a relationship with Katie in the months before she died." "Bullshit!" "Why would he invent a story like that, Lena?" "I don't know." "Lena," Erin said, "why would you protect a man who has taken advantage of your friend like that?" "He didn't take advantage of her. She wasn't a child." "Then why do you hate him so much?" "Were you jealous?" I lost it then. "I hated him, you stupid bitch, because he took her from me." I couldn't help it. I was just too tired to lie anymore, and it was obvious they would find out anyway, now that Josh had opened his big mouth. So I sat in our kitchen, and I betrayed her. Yes, Katie and Mark Henderson had a relationship. It started in the autumn, it ended in April. It started up again in May, I thought, but not for long. "I think," Erin said, "you need to go back to the beginning, Lena." "No, I don't think she does," Julia said suddenly. "Lena's tired. That's enough for today." "You're right," Sean stood up. "Do you realise what this will do to her parents?" I said. Erin turned to me. "Well, at least they'll have a reason why." "No, they won't. She didn't do it because he broke her heart. She did it to protect him. She thought he would go to prison as a sex offender. Don't you understand? She was getting rid of the evidence."
Sunday, 23rd of August. Patrick. The dream Patrick had of his wife was always the same. She was in the water. He swam out and grabbed hold of her, but as he did, her face turned towards his, and through her broken, bloodied mouth, she laughed. It was always the same, only last night, when the face turned towards him, it was Helen's. Patrick woke with a terrible fright. He got up and went next door to Helen's room. She started when she saw him. "Patrick, what's wrong? Did I leave some rubbish in your car? The other day, I took some rubbish from the cottage. What did you do with it?" I threw it away." She sat up. "Dad, do you think it had started up again, him and her?" "Maybe, but it's over now, isn't it?" He went down to the kitchen, his heart heavy. He felt sure Helen had lied to him, and it was Sean's mistake that had led them here. But who was he to criticise his son? As a young man, he'd chosen badly for himself. He chose a beauty, a weak, selfish beauty. He'd chosen badly once, but not a second time, because Helen was his choice. The daughter of a colleague, quiet and plain and hard-working. He'd chosen well for his son. Women brought him low. Lauren first, and then Jeanie. But not Helen. Surely not Helen. He thought again of the dream. History repeating itself, only the women getting worse.
Nicky, Jeanie said it was about time somebody did something about all this. Well, he used to say I should keep my mouth shut for my own protection, Nicky retorted. But I've tried. I've been pointing in the right direction. I left the sister a message. She remembered Jeanie's last visit to the flat. She was shaking with fear. She told Nicky that Patrick Townsend had been to see her. He said that if she kept on asking questions, if she continued to ruin his reputation, then he would see to it that she was hurt. Not by me, girl. I'll get someone else to do the dirty work. Jeanie had made Nicky promise that she'd leave it alone. But what about the boy? I know, but you have to be quiet, Nix. Say nothing. Because Patrick will do for me and he'll do for you too. Jeanie left a couple of days later. She never came back.
Jules, it was mid-afternoon. I must have fallen asleep. I dragged myself across to the bathroom and turned on the shower. I was too exhausted to undress, so I just stood there, while the room got steamier. I turned off the water, and then I saw 2 letters appearing in the condensation on the mirror. L and S. I stood there, staring at them. It was the sort of thing you used to do to scare me. You must have told Lena, and now she was doing it too. But why LS? Why Libby Seaton? I went across the hallway into your bedroom. There was a smell in the air, something sweet, cloying. The drawer next to your bed was closed, but when I pulled it open, the lighter, the one on which you'd had Libby's initials engraved, was gone. Someone had taken it. I made my way downstairs. I needed some air. But as I opened the front door, Louise Whittaker was standing there. Is your niece at home? I showed her into the house. Lena was sitting at the kitchen table. She greeted Louise meekly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Whittaker, I'm really sorry. All the time, you said nothing. And worse than that, you let him get away with it. Lena finished the sentence. Yes, I did, and it made me sick. But I did it for Katie. Don't you say her name to me, Louise hissed. She raised her hand to her throat. She was gripping the bluebird between her fingers. It wasn't from you, was it? Lena hesitated for a moment before shaking her head. It was from him, wasn't it? Louise ripped the chain from her neck, slamming it down on the table. He gave it to her, and you let me hang it around my neck. Lena sighed. Explain this to me, then. Louise said, her voice very low. If Katie loved that man, and if he loved her back, then why? Why did she do what she did? Lena looked afraid. It wasn't him, she sighed. Katie and I argued. I wanted her to stop seeing him. I thought... She shook her head. I just didn't want her to see him anymore. A flash of understanding crossed Louise's face. She understood in that moment, as did I. You threatened her, I said, with exposure. Yes, Lena said, barely audible. I did. Louise left without a word. Lena sat motionless, staring out of the window. I lied to her, she said. To Louise. There was no point in telling her the truth, not now. She turned to look at me, and she looked weary. I didn't threaten to tell anyone. I would never have done that to her. I loved her. So, if you didn't threaten her... I think I knew the answer before she said it. It was Mum. Jules. We did argue, like I said. Lena stared back at the window. I didn't want Katie to see him anymore. She said I was immature. I called her a slut. It was that sort of fight. Stupid. Horrible. When Katie left, I realised that Mum was in her room, right next door. I thought she was out. She overheard the whole thing and she said she was going to speak to Louise. I begged her not to. I told her it would ruin Katie's whole life. I actually begged her. In the end, she promised she wouldn't do anything without giving me time to persuade Katie to stop seeing him. She turned to face me. But then, a couple of days later, I saw Mum at school, talking to Mr. Henderson. I knew I had to say something to Katie. Her voice cracked. She died 3 days later. Lena sighed. But when we talked about it afterwards, Mum said she never mentioned Katie to Mark Henderson. She said they were talking about me. She swore she hadn't said anything, but she felt so guilty. I could see it. She stopped swimming in the river, and she became obsessed with telling the truth. She kept going on about how irresponsible it was to let things go. She looked at me. You would know all this, Julia, if you'd only spoken to her. Lena, I'm sorry. Do you know why I know she killed herself? I shook my head. On the day Mum died, we had a fight. I yelled at her saying that if she'd been a good parent, she could have helped Katie, and she told me she'd tried. She'd given Katie a lift one day. She said Katie was upset, and Mum told her, "You don't have to go through this by yourself. I can help you. Your parents can help you." Katie went to the pool that night, without meaning to. It was Mum who tipped her over the edge, and Katie tipped Mum over the edge too. A wave of sadness hit me. Was that it now? After all this, you did jump. Lena gave me a sad smile. I didn't tell the police because I didn't want anyone to blame her. It wasn't her fault. It wasn't hers or mine. It wasn't yours. I tried to embrace her, but she pushed me away. Please, I need to be by myself. I'm going for a walk.
Nicky sat in her room and dozed in the chair, then woke and thought that maybe she had seen Lena heading for the pool. But it might have been a premonition. Later, though, much later, she was certain that she saw the girl moving like a ghost through the square, a ghost with purpose, fairly whipping along.
Jules. I waited in the kitchen for Lena to come home. I rang her phone, left messages. Finally, defeated by exhaustion, I went to bed. I drifted in and out of dreams until I heard Lena's footsteps on the stairs. I heard her going into her room and turning her music on. I slowly drifted back to sleep. When I woke again, the music was still playing. I stumbled into the hall and shouted for Lena to turn the music down. I yanked her door open. The room was empty. I phoned Lena again. When there was no answer, I tried Sean Townsend, but the call went straight to voicemail.
Monday the 24th of August. Mark. It was after 2 o'clock in the morning when he got home. When he saw that all the windows of his house had been smashed, he knew he'd been betrayed. He stood on the lawn and sobbed. He cursed the day he first set eyes on her. Hadn't Katie been the one who started all this, teasing him? So why should it be him, then, left alone to suffer the consequences? He gritted his teeth and opened the back door. She came at him. He batted her away, but she came again. What choice did he have? And now there was blood on the floor, and it was nearly light. He had to go.
Jules. It came to me quite suddenly. I knew. Not where Lena was, but who she was. I was sitting in the kitchen, dazed, punch-drunk. The police had left. They told me to stay put in case she came home. And you were in my head, admonishing me. Why didn't you go after her like I went after you? When I was 17, I saved my sister from drowning. When you were 17, Nell, you drove me into the water and held me down. But was it you who drove me there, or was it Robbie? Or some combination of the two, some combination? Then it came to me. I went to your study and found the picture of Lena and Katie. And Lena's smile isn't your smile. It's his. It's Robbie Cannon's. Lena is Robbie Cannon's daughter. I thought of that day, the way he'd looked at Lena. He wasn't looking at her to be seduced. She already belonged to him, so maybe he'd come to take what was rightfully his. DS Morgan had said he had a car workshop in Gateshead. I found the homepage on the internet. I didn't call the police. I just picked up the car keys and left. The garage was under some railway arches. I parked the car. "Can I help you, pet?" I turned, and there he was, uglier even than he had looked on the day of the funeral. "Is she here?" I asked. "Is who here?" "Lena Abbott. Is she here?" "Nell Abbott's girl? Why do you think Nell's girl would be here?" He wasn't faking it. He was too stupid to fake it. He didn't know where Lena was. I turned to go. "Hang on." He squinted at me. "I saw you at the funeral." Finally it dawned on him. "Julia." His face broke into a smile. "Julia, why didn't you say something?" "Lena ran off. I thought maybe—" "Well, she isn't here. I don't even know the kid. First time I laid eyes on her was at the funeral. Gave me a bit of a turn, if I'm honest. She's so like Nell." He stepped closer to me. "Can't believe you're Julia. You look so different." An ugly smile smeared across his face. "I popped your cherry, didn't I, girl?" "Popped your cherry." I thought I would gag. "No, Robbie. You raped me." "I what?" he hissed. "I didn't rape you. I was 13 years old. I told you to stop. I was crying." "You cried because it was your first time. You never said no, you lying bitch." He started laughing. "I had half the girls in Beckford trailing after me. You honestly think I needed to rape a fat gal like you?" He believed it. I could see that he believed every word he said. I walked away, and then I stopped. If Robbie didn't think he'd raped me, how could you have done? I turned around. Did Nell know? His lip curled. "You're joking, aren't you? Imagine what she'd have said if I told her I'd banged her little sister just after I'd done banging her." He laughed. "I just told you tried it on with me, and then you ran off crying when I knocked you back, and she ran after you." There was a sudden tumbling of images in my head. "You didn't know." I ran to the car and drove away. "You didn't know he raped me. When you said, 'I'm sorry he hurt you,' you meant you were sorry I felt rejected. When you said, 'What did you expect?' you meant that of course he would reject me. I was just a child, and when you asked me, wasn't there some part of you that liked it? You were talking about the river. You wanted to know what it felt like to abandon yourself to the water. You didn't know." Back in Beckford, I left the car on the bridge and walked along the river path. It was early afternoon and the air was cooling. Not a perfect day for a swim, but I'd been waiting so long and I wanted to be there with you. I stood on the bank. I started to walk forward. I closed my eyes, gasping as my feet sank into the cool mud. But I didn't stop. I kept going. And when the water closed over my head, I realized through my terror that it did feel good. It did.
Mark. Blood seeped through the bandage on Mark's hand. He had no idea where to run. He'd started driving north towards Edinburgh, but then had changed his mind and turned back. He left the main road and drove towards the coast. He needed to stop. To plan. Everything he'd feared was coming to pass. That Friday evening in June, he hadn't been expecting Katie. He remembered opening the door and then seeing the frightened look on her face. "Nell Abbott knows," Katie said quietly. And then it all came tumbling out. The things she'd been hiding from him. Lena had known for months. Katie's brother too.
"Do you have any idea what you've done? When that bitch tells the police, my life will be over. You know what they do to men like me in prison. Do you think I'll survive that? I won't."
He saw the fear and hurt in her face, and he still said, "And it will be down to you." When they pulled her body from the pool, Mark blamed himself for days for what he'd said to her in anger. But he knew it wasn't really his fault. How could it be? Who could control who they fell in love with? Mark heard a thump from the boot of the car. He still had no idea what he was going to do with Lena. His first thought had been to dump the car in Edinburgh and then get the ferry to the continent. They'd find her, eventually. He might feel terrible, but she came at him, not the other way around. He'd fallen on the kitchen floor, his bag skidding away from him, and from it fell the bracelet. He'd been carrying it around since he took it from Helen Townsend's office. Lena had stared at it, and then she was upon him again, but this time she had the kitchen scissors. He raised his hands in self-defence, and she sliced one of them open. He heard the thump-thump again. He slammed his foot on the brake. There was a satisfying thud as her body banged into metal, and then all was quiet.
Lena, I was frightened when I woke. It was totally dark, but I realised from the noise that I was in a car. My head was sore, and my mouth too. I should never have gone to his house, not without a clear plan. I just wanted to stand in front of him and make him share a little of the blame. I hated to think of Katie being here. I wanted to leave. And then the door opened and there he was. As the light came on, I just went for him. He fell, I think, and I was on my knees and something skittered across the floor towards me. It was my mother's bracelet. Lena, Mark said, and I looked up and I could see that he was afraid. I got to my feet and he stepped towards me. I grabbed the scissors that were on the kitchen table and went for him. But I must have missed, mustn't I? Because he's driving and I'm stuck in the back here with a bump on my head. I banged my fists on the roof and suddenly, bang! The car stopped moving and I slammed into the edge of the boot. I cried. I cried for the pain and I cried for Katie. But you know what, Kate? I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. Mark Henderson doesn't deserve to be hounded or beaten. He deserves worse. I know you loved him, but he didn't just ruin your life. He's ruined mine too. He killed my mother.
Erin. I was in the office with Sean when Callie rushed in. There's another one, sir. In the water, a young woman. I thought Sean was going to heave. Sean ran and I followed. The last thing on earth I wanted was to see them pulling that girl out of the water. It wasn't her, though. It was Jules. She was already sitting on the bank. Her teeth were chattering. Sean put his jacket around her shoulders. She wouldn't say a word to us. She just sat there, trembling, staring at the water. The relief was short-lived. The uniforms who'd gone to welcome Mark Henderson home had found his house empty, and there were signs of a struggle in the kitchen, blood on the floor. Henderson's car was nowhere to be found. "Oh, Christ," Sean said. "Lena."
Jules. The young policewoman wanted to come into the house, but I said I was okay. I wanted to be alone. I went upstairs and ran a bath. I had no desire to be immersed in water again, but I needed to get warm. I let my body slip down into the tub, my shoulders submerged. A sudden thump made me jerk upwards. "Lena?" There was someone in the house. I got out of the bath and dressed as quickly as I could. I tiptoed downstairs, and there, out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow. Someone sitting on the window seat.
Erin. Sean went to meet Callie at Henderson's place. I'd been dispatched to speak to Louise Whittaker about the confrontation she'd had with Lena. When I got to the house, Josh opened the door. "Have you found Lena?" he asked. "Not yet, but don't worry." "Who is it, Josh?" Louise called from upstairs. Her son ignored her. "It's DS Morgan, Mrs. Whittaker. Can I come up?" "He's angry with me," Louise said by way of greeting. "He blames me for Lena running off." I followed her along the landing. "He blames me. I blame Nell. I blame Lena. Round and round we go." We stopped outside an empty bedroom. Louise smiled wearily. "You can come in. I'm almost done." She knelt down, placing books into boxes. Sometimes I think Josh believes I pushed Nell Abbot over that cliff. He certainly holds me responsible for the fact that Lena is motherless, alone. "Do you believe she has no idea who her father is?" She nodded. Nell claimed it was a one-night stand. She once told me that she only ever slept with married men because they were discreet and undemanding. Whenever you saw her, she was alone, or with her daughter. She sighed. "The only man I've ever seen Lena be even vaguely affectionate to is Sean." "Sean Townsend? Are you saying there's something—" untoward between Sian and Lena? God, no, Louise laughed. Not Lena. So, Nell, there was something between Sian and Nell Abbot. Louise didn't answer. And then I thought of the first time I saw Sian. Stood by the pool with Nell Abbot at his feet, head bowed as though he was praying over her, his shaky hands. Listen, if you're saying there was something between Sian and Nell, then... I said nothing of the sort. Louise stood up. I think it's time you left, Detective.
Sian. Traffic control have picked up Henderson's car, Callie told me when I arrived at the house. She looked at her notebook. First on the A68 going north towards Edinburgh, but then later going south towards Eyemouth. He's panicking. Anyone else in the car? She shook her head, but that could just mean the other person isn't upright. I had a scrap of memory. A woman lying slumped in a car seat. A sick woman, convulsing, drooling. I pushed it aside. Isn't there a girlfriend? Tracy McBride. Uniforms are bringing her down to Beckford for a chat, but she claims she hasn't seen Henderson for a good while. She says he dumped her, telling her he'd fallen for another woman. Tracy didn't know who the woman was. I was devastated, she told me, back at the station. One minute I'm shopping for wedding dresses, and the next he's telling me he can't go through with it because he's met the love of his life. She smiled sadly. Something happened to him? No. We just need to talk to him. You don't know where he might go, if he needed to get away. She thought about it. My dad has a place on the coast, just north of Craster. Mark and I went there at weekends quite a bit. It's quite isolated. We used to leave a key under a pot, but then we discovered someone had been using it. When was the last time that happened? She shrugged. April? Yeah, the Easter holidays.
Lena, he apologised when he let me out of the boot. I'm sorry, Lena, but what would you have had me do? I started laughing, but he told me to shut up. We were at a house by the sea, just one house on the cliffs, with a garden and a table outside. There was no one around. He led me over to the table and handed me a tissue to wipe my mouth. There was dried blood on the cloth around his hand. For a long time we just sat there. Why did you keep her bracelet? I asked eventually. Why take it? He didn't look at me, just stared at the sea. I don't know. Insurance, I suppose. I didn't understand what he was talking about. I thought my mum had left me, I said. I thought she chose to die because she felt guilty about Katie. He said nothing. I believed that. And now it turns out she didn't. You took her from me, just like you took Katie. He smiled at me. Katie wasn't yours, Lena. She was mine. I wanted to scream at him then. She wasn't yours. I stared down at the ground, and there in the dirt I saw a long nail. She loved me, and I loved her, completely. I let him talk, because all I could do was focus on the nail. I levered it up with my foot, and I grabbed it. I went for him then, but I wasn't quick enough. As I sprang to my feet, Mark lunged at me. "What are you doing?" He took the nail and shoved me down onto the table. I felt the metal spike graze my throat, the weight of him on top of me, just like she must have felt him when they were together. Vomit came up in my throat and I spat it out and said, "She was too good for you."
Jules, the old woman who claims to be a psychic, was sitting on the window seat. A clicking sound. Click and hiss. "Oh, there you are. I let myself in. I hope you don't mind." "I do mind," I said loudly. "What are you doing here?" Click and hiss. Click and hiss. The lighter. She had it in her hand. "That's Nell's lighter. Have you been in this house, taking things?" "Oh, calm down, Julia." She pointed at the armchair. "Come and join me." I was so taken aback that I obliged. "Why do you have Nell's lighter?" "Not Nell's." She pointed to the engraving. "There, see? LS. "Yes, I know. Libby Seaton, but..." Nicky cackled. "You thought LS was for Libby. No. This lighter belonged to Lauren Townsend. Lauren used to be Slater, your detective inspector's old girl. Sean's mother. The Lauren in the story is Sean Townsend's mother." "That's right. And it's not just a story, is it? Lauren was the one on whose page you wrote, 'Beckford is a place to get rid of troublesome women.'" Nicky was still talking. "I took the lighter because I needed something of hers, didn't I? So I could speak to her. Here, She handed it to me. But I can't say for sure why she had it. The lighter's Lauren's, and Patrick had it last. It's about Lauren and Patrick. How is this about them? Well, Nell was writing her stories about them, and the story Nell heard, the one where Lauren runs off into the night and her husband and son chase after her, it wasn't true. Jeanie was there. I told Nell our Jeanie's story and Nell wrote it down. She handed me a sheaf of papers. Jeanie was a policewoman when Lauren died. Jeanie didn't believe Lauren went in without a push. She knew Lauren's old man smacked her about. You're saying Patrick killed his wife, and Nell wrote it down. She wrote down the things Jeanie told me when she was alive, but not what she told me when she was dead. Well, listen to your sister, because he did for them, after a fashion. Patrick Townsend did for Lauren and for our Jeanie, and if I'm not mistaken, he's done for your Nell. The Drowning Pool by Danielle Abbott. Unpublished. Lauren, again, 1983. It was Jeanie who arrived at the river first. Patrick Townsend had called the station, panicking and incoherent, shouting about his wife and the drowning pool. When Jeanie got there, the boy was under the trees, his head on his knees. What happened, Sean? Mummy's in the water. And then Jeanie saw Patrick dragging himself onto the bank. I was too late. Paramedics in uniforms arrived. Sean clung to his father. Jeanie, could you take him to your place? Patrick said. He's frightened and he doesn't want to go home. Back at her flat, Jeanie made cheese on toast and cups of tea. How did you get to the river, Sean? She asked. We all went together in the car. All of you? Sean's face crumpled. The storm woke me, and then there were funny noises in the kitchen. What sort of funny noises? Like a dog makes when it's sad. Like a whimper. Sean nodded. But we don't have a dog because I'm not allowed. He sipped his tea. I didn't want to be by myself, so Dad put me in the car. And your mum? He frowned. Not supposed to talk about that. And he didn't say another word.
Sean. Crest is about an hour's drive from Beckford, but I never go. When Tracy told me where the house was, I felt guilty. I felt the way I had when I thought about my mother's offer of a birthday treat, the one I'd rejected. If I'd gone to the beach, would things have turned out differently? This was one of the thoughts that occupied me after my mother died. Later I came to understand that there was nothing I could have done. What my mother wanted was not for me to do something, but for the man she loved not to leave her. And then Nell came along. When she first came to the house, she spoke to my father about my mother's death. He wasn't angry, he just said there was nothing to talk about. Nothing happened. So she came to me. It was in the middle of summer, and I found her leaning against my car. I'd seen her around before then. She was beautiful. Hard not to notice. She told me what my father had said, that nothing happened. I told her that he just meant that we don't talk about it. Well, of course. But I'm working on this book, you see. She put her hand on my arm. Please, Mr. Townsend. Sean. I've wanted to talk to you about this for such a long time. She was smiling at me, and it was impossible for me to refuse her. I knew then that I was in trouble, that she was trouble, the sort of trouble I'd been waiting for my whole life. I said I'd meet her at the mill house. I asked her to keep this meeting private because it would upset my father, upset my wife. She smiled again, and we both knew then where it was going. The first time I went to talk to her, we didn't talk at all. So I had to go back. She teased the story out of me, strand by strand. She coaxed things out of me I didn't want to tell her. I knew that I should stop, but I couldn't. We stopped meeting at the mill house because Lena was frequently home. We went to the cottage instead. I've no idea why my father was there that afternoon, but he waited in the trees until Nell left, and then he beat me. He punched me to the ground and kicked me. I didn't fight back because I knew he'd stop when he knew that I couldn't take any more. Afterwards he took the keys and drove me home.
Lena. Mark scraped the nail against my neck and I closed my eyes. You have no idea what I've suffered, he said. Then he grabbed my hair and slammed my head onto the table. I started to cry. Mark released me and stood up. Stop it. Stop it, Lena. Don't cry. It was weird because then he was crying too. I stopped. We were looking at each other. I didn't do it, he said eventually. What you think I did. To your mother. You did. You have her bracelet. Where did you get it? He tossed the nail aside. I'll tell you. Only you have to do something for me, he sighed. I won't hurt you, Lena, unless you make me, okay? I said nothing. Look, I need you to go back to Beckford and tell the police that you lied, that you made all this up. I squinted at him. Seriously? Why would I do that? It's too late anyway. Josh spoke to them. Tell them Josh lied then. And if you do that... He slid his hand into his pocket and pulled out the bracelet. I'll tell you what you need to know. I stared at the bracelet. I didn't know what to do. I thought about all the stupid mistakes I'd made so far, and I didn't want to make another one. So I played scared. I played grateful. Do you promise? Will you let me go back to Beckford? He sat down and placed the bracelet on the table. I found it. I laughed. You found it? Give me a break. I went to Helen Townsend's office. I was looking for... He looked embarrassed. Something of hers. Katie's. I wanted... It was in Helen's desk drawer. You found it in Mrs. Townsend's desk. I know it makes no sense, he said. Only it did. Or it could. Mark was staring at me. There's something I'm not getting, isn't there? What did your mother do? To Helen? I said nothing. I picked up the bracelet. But I've helped you, haven't I? Now it's your turn. He was breathing short and fast, and I knew he was afraid. I've helped you. I stared at him. Katie drowned herself because she was afraid of what might happen to you. He didn't move. She did it for you. And what have you done for her? His shoulders were shaking. You've denied her completely, like she meant nothing to you. Don't you think she deserved better? He was blubbering. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Forgive me. God, forgive me. Bit late for that, don't you think?
Sean, I was on my way to Craster. Uniforms had already arrived at the house. Henderson's car was there, but the house was empty. No one had seen Lena for almost 24 hours. I needed to make her safe. After all, I'd failed her mother so badly. I'd stopped seeing Nell after the incident with my father. I wasn't alone in her company until after Katie Whittaker's death. I interviewed her as a witness, which of course was unprofessional, but a good deal of my conduct over the past year could fall under that description. It felt like grief seeing her again, because the Nell from before, the one who'd bewitched me, was no longer there. Guilt spilled out of her during our interview. She insisted that the drowning pool project had nothing to do with Katie's death, and yet her sentences all prefaced with, I should have, or I didn't realise. Knowing what I know now, I can only imagine that her guilt was about Henderson, that she must have known something. That evening I went to the cottage. It was late when she arrived, not entirely sober, tearful, on the edge. Afterwards we went to the river. Nell was hyper, manic almost. She talked about the truth, how she was tired of telling stories. We'll never know what was going through Katie's mind, I said. She shook her head. It's not just that, it's... Her hand gripped mine. Nikki Sage has been telling... I laughed. You're talking to Nikki. She's crazy. You'd be surprised, Sean, how much of what she says rings true. Nell, she just tells you what you want to hear. Why would she think I wanted to hear that your mother was murdered? She whispered.
Lena, Mum didn't choose to go. She didn't choose to leave me, and I was going to do whatever it took to make sure Helen Townsend paid. I was running along the coastal path, Mum's bracelet in my hand. I knew there was no one behind me. Of course there was no one behind me. No one was coming. I'd no room for guilt. I had to focus. Who could I turn to? Who was going to help me?
Sean. My phone buzzed. Sean? It was Erin. Where are you? Just outside Craster? Look, I need to talk to you the second you're back in Beckford. She cut the call. Craster was quiet. I passed the very smokehouse where my mother had promised to take me, and tried to picture her face as I did sometimes, but I never succeeded. I drove to the house. As I got out of the car, one of the PCs shouted, Sir, we've got a call. A shopkeeper in the next village says he's got a girl there. She's asking him to call the police.
Jules, My phone rang and I saw Sean's name. For a second I didn't dare pick it up. What would I do if something had happened to Lena? My hand trembling, I answered. And there, she was safe. Lena was safe. They were bringing her home. It seemed an age before I heard a car outside. Sean helped Lena into the house. Her face was pale and dirty, but she was safe. "Lena," I said as she came through the door, and she nodded at me. "Where is he?" I hissed at Sean. "He's gone," said Lena. "His car's still there," said Sean. "He can't have gone far." "Where do you think he's gone, Lena?" I asked, but she turned away. Sean shook his head. "She doesn't want to talk. I think she's just exhausted." Sean and Erin left us. "I'm starving," Lena said. "I'll have a shower and then... Could you make me spaghetti bolognese again?" The tone of her voice, the softness in it, was new. "Of course I can." She wrapped her arms around me then and sobbed like a child. I tried to take her hand, but it was curled tightly into a fist. "It's going to be all right," I told her. She looked at me, then held out her hand, her fingers unfurling to reveal the treasure inside. Nell's bracelet. She didn't jump. Mum didn't leave me. She didn't jump. After we had eaten, we stayed sitting at the table. She told me about the bracelet. "He told me he took it from Mrs. Townsend's office." "Helen Townsend," Lena nodded. "But why would she have the bracelet? I don't understand." "Neither do I," she said quietly. "Not really." She sat with her head bowed, visibly sagging in front of me. "You're exhausted," I said. "You should go to bed." "Will you come with me? I don't want to be by myself." "I followed her up the stairs into your room, not her own." She clambered onto your bed, patting the space beside her. We lay there, side by side. "You know what I don't understand," she whispered, "is why you hated Mum so much." She didn't understand either. And so I told her. All the things I should have told you, I told your daughter instead. "But why didn't you just tell her what really happened? He raped you." Lena cried. "You should have gone to prison." "I was very young. I thought I'd done something wrong." "But why didn't you tell her about it later on?" "Because I thought she knew what had happened that night." "You thought she knew and did nothing?" How could I explain that? Wasn't there some part of you that liked it? Lena's voice grew cold. "Why do people always choose to blame the woman? It's like when someone has an affair, why does the wife always hate the other woman? Why doesn't she hate her husband? Why isn't he the one who gets shoved off a bloody cliff?"
Erin. By the time Sean and I left the mill house yesterday, I'd worked myself up into a state and I just came out with it. "What exactly was going on with you and Nell Abbot?" "What did you say?" He pulled the car over to a lay-by. "It was suggested to me," I said. "Hinted at." "Hinted? Someone hinted something, did they?" He leaned across and opened the passenger door. "Get out of the car." I barely had time to close the door before he accelerated away. I started to walk along the river. I needed to think. Sean had acted like a guilty man, or an offended man. I could ignore Louise's implications, but if I did that, I'd be ignoring the fact that where there is sex, there is motive. He had a motive to get rid of Nell, and his wife did too. As I approached the bend, I saw Nicky Sage standing in the water. "Are you all right, Mrs. Sage?" She nodded and stepped onto the bank. "Have you been to see Townsend yet? Have you asked him about his wife?" "You mean Helen?" She looked at me, her expression contemptuous. "Sean's wife? What's she got to do with anything?" "No, the one you're interested in is Patrick's wife, Lauren. Lauren who died 30 years ago." "Yes, she's the one who started all of this. You think the dead don't matter?" I was losing interest. "I need to go. It was good talking to you." I'd decided to get to Sean's place early the next morning. I could drive him to the office, and then we'd have time to talk with no one around. It was 8:30 by the time I got there. His car wasn't in the courtyard, but I knocked on the door, just in case. But there was no reply. As I headed back to my car, I passed Patrick Townsend's place. The door was half open. That seemed as good as an invitation. "Hello?" I called out. "Mr. Townsend?" There was no answer. I walked into the living room, a Spartan place with bare walls. The only concession to decoration was a selection of photographs on the mantelpiece. Patrick Townsend in uniform, Sian as a child, and numerous pictures of Helen. There were no pictures of Sian's mother. My phone bleeped. I had a voicemail. It was Jules. "I need to talk to you. Alone. It's urgent. I'll see you at the station." As I slipped the phone back into my pocket, I heard a creak of floorboards. I turned. I froze. Helen was standing by the door. She had a knife in her hand and was gripping it so tightly that blood was dripping onto the floor.
Helen. Helen had no idea why Erin Morgan was wandering about Patrick's house as though she owned it. "I was chopping onions," she said. "You startled me." This wasn't exactly true, because she'd stopped chopping onions when she'd seen the car pull up. She'd stood stock still while Erin knocked, and then had watched her wander over to Patrick's place. She could feel the detective watching her now. She wanted Sian to be there, and Patrick. She had an urge to lay everything on the table. Mistakes had been made, admittedly, but the Townsends were a good family. They were good people. Surely she had nothing to fear.
Jules. I left Lena tucked up in her mother's bed in the morning, still sound asleep. I wrote her a note, saying that I'd meet her at the police station at 11 to make a statement. I drove to the station, stopping halfway to ring Erin. I needed to talk to her alone. Why isn't he the one who gets shoved off the cliff? Lena had been talking about Sian Townsend last night. It had all come out. How Sian had fallen in love with Nell. Helen must have found out. She must have taken revenge. Erin didn't answer her phone, so I left a message. The officer on the desk at the station told me that D.I. Townsend was in Newcastle for the day, and he didn't know the whereabouts of DS Morgan. I went back to my car. I took your bracelet out of my pocket. I put it in a plastic bag. The chances of there being a fingerprint or some DNA were slim, but slim was a shot at an answer. Nikki said you were dead because you found out something about Patrick Townsend. Lena said you were dead because of your affair with Sian, and Helen Townsend would not stand for that. No matter which way I turned, I saw Townsend.
Erin. Helen was staring out of the window. "He's been gone ages." "Who has?" I asked. "Patrick. He goes to the cottage. That's where Sian used to take her. That's where..." She turned to look at me. "Why are you here?" "I came to talk to Sian." "What about?" About an allegation of improper conduct." And then I heard footsteps and Patrick entered the room. For a moment, none of us said anything. He stared at me. Then he turned to Helen. He noticed her bloody hand. "What happened? Did she do this to you?" "It's nothing. It wasn't her. She wants to talk to Sian about professional conduct." Patrick sat down at the table. "Do you know," he said to Helen, "why they moved her up here? A former colleague told me that this fine detective was removed from her post in the Met because she seduced a younger officer. And not just any officer, a woman. Can you imagine that? And then she comes here and wants to talk about my son's professional conduct." He turned to me. "If Sian got caught sleeping with one of his juniors, he'd be out on his ear." "How about if Sian was sleeping with a woman who ended up dead?" I asked. He jumped up and put his hand around my throat. "Watch your mouth, you dirty bitch." I gave him a hard shove in the chest and he let go. "Dad," Helen said, "you're scaring her." He turned and smiled at her. "I know, love. I mean to."
Jules. I left the car outside the Townsend's place. The bracelet in my pocket. I strode into the courtyard. I had come on behalf of my sister, to make things right for her. I was determined. I was unafraid. I was unafraid until Patrick Townsend opened the door. "What do you want?" he demanded. I stepped back. He did for his wife, Nikki had told me, and for your sister too. I was... "Jules?" A voice called out. "Is that you?" It was quite a scene. Helen was there with blood on her hand, and Erin too, pretending that she was in control of the situation. "What brings you here? We're supposed to be meeting at the station." "Yes, but..." I turned to Helen. "The reason I came was to speak to you, Mrs. Townsend." My hand trembling. I fished the plastic bag out of my pocket. "I wanted to ask you
when you took this bracelet from my sister's wrist. Helen's eyes widened. Where did you get it from, Jules? Erin asked. From Lena, who got it from Mark Henderson, who took it from Helen, who, I'm guessing, took it from my sister before she killed her. Patrick laughed. What utter garbage! It was in your office, wasn't it, Helen? I said. Helen looked stricken. No, she sighed. I found it. I didn't know it was hers. Of course she didn't know! Patrick shouted suddenly. He placed his hand on her shoulder. Helen had the bracelet because I left it in her car. Careless of me, but I've become rather forgetful lately. Helen said nothing. Okay, Erin said. And where did you get it? Where do you think I got it, you moron? I ripped it off that whore's wrist before I threw her over!
Patrick. That's not what happened, Helen cried. No one spoke. The sister sobbed silently. The detective watched him, watched Helen. Come on, then. He suddenly felt irritable. You're a police officer. Do what you have to do. Erin took a deep breath and stepped towards him. Patrick Townsend, I'm arresting you on suspicion of the murder of Daniel Abbot. You do not have... Yes, all right, he said wearily. I know all that. Helen started to cry. He kissed her forehead and then followed the detective out of the door. Sitting in the interview room at Beckford station, he felt a surprising sensation of relief. He wanted to tell his story, while his mind was still his own. He expressed his intention to make a full confession to the murders of Lawrence Slater in 1983 and Daniel Abbot in 2015. Lauren was a straightforward tale. They'd argued at the house, she had attacked him, and he had defended himself. In the course of that defence, she had been wounded too grievously to save. So, in an effort to spare his son the truth and, he admitted, to spare himself a prison sentence, he drove to the river, carried her body up the cliff, and threw her, lifeless now, into the water. Was your son with you at the time? DS Morgan asked. He didn't see anything. He was confused, and so I told him a story, one which would make his life livable. Don't you see that? I've protected him, Patrick said, pride swelling in his chest, all his life. The story of Nell Abbott was less easy to recount. He discovered that Nell had been speaking to Nicky Sage about Lauren. He was worried she might say something to Sean, so he arranged to meet with her. And she met you at the cliff? DS Morgan was incredulous. Patrick smiled. You have no idea of her self-importance. I told her I would tell her the story as it had never been told before, right there, on the spot, where it happened. Then, once I had her up there, it was easy. And the bracelet? I was angry that she'd been carrying on with my son, threatening his marriage. I ripped the bracelet from her wrist. I pushed her.
September. Lena, we're leaving tomorrow. The house will be rented out. But I will live here again. I know I will. I'll come back when it doesn't hurt so much and I don't see Mum everywhere I look. I'm scared about going to London with Jules. Jules, not Julia, is really odd. But I'm a bit weird too, so maybe we'll be fine. She cooks and fusses around me. She tells me off for smoking. She makes me tell her where I'm going and when I'll be back. Like other people's mums do.
Louise. Lena had come to say goodbye and brought with her Nell's manuscripts. Do what you want with them, she said. I never want to see them again. The girl had asked if Louise could ever forgive her, and Louise said that she already had, which was a lie, but spoken out of kindness. For while she knew that she could never forgive Lena, she couldn't hate her either, because if anything was clear, if anything in this horror was without doubt, it was Lena's love for Katie.
December. Nicky. Beckford was quiet. Winter was coming, and lots of people had moved on. Patrick Townsend was rotting in his cell. And his son had run away to find some peace. Good luck to him with that. The mill house was empty. Lena Abbott and her aunt off to London. And the Whittakers had left. Things were quieter in her head, too. Jeanie wasn't talking as loudly as she used to. And when she did, it was more of a friendly chat.
Erin, I went back to Beckford just before Christmas. I wanted to speak to Sean, but I couldn't find him. The address I was given for him turned out to be an empty house. I even contacted HMP Frankland, but they said that Patrick hadn't had a single visitor since his arrival. I wanted to ask Sean for the truth, if he'd known about his father all along. After Sean left the police, there was an inquiry. Questions asked and left unanswered. And not just about Nell's case, but Mark Henderson's too. How it was that he was able to disappear without trace from under our noses. As for me, I went over and over that last interview with Patrick. The story he'd told. Nell's bracelet torn from her wrist. But the clasp on the bracelet was unbroken. I did point this out at the time, but after Patrick's confession and Sean's resignation, and all the general arse-covering and back-passing, no one was really in the mood to listen. As I sat by the river, I felt that Nell's story, and Lauren's, and Katie's too, were incomplete, unfinished. I never really saw all there was to see.
Helen. She'd found herself a job for which she was overqualified, and a small ground-floor flat. When they first got to the town, they rented a house. But then she woke up one morning and Sean was gone, so she moved out. She hadn't tried to call him. She knew he wasn't coming back. Their family was broken. It had always been Patrick who held them together.
January. Jules. It's an odd thing to sit across the breakfast table every morning from a 15-year-old you. She has the same dreamlike expression when she's lost in thought. She doesn't listen. She's willful and annoying. She kisses me on the cheek every morning before she goes to school. I cannot make up to you the things I did wrong. My eagerness to think the worst of you. My failure to help you. My failure even to try to love you. Because there is nothing I can do for you. My atonement will have to be an act of motherhood. I could not be a sister to you, but I will try to be a mother to your child.
Patrick no longer dreamed of his wife, and when he woke, it was always Helen's face he saw, her stricken expression when he told them what he'd done. He was grateful he did not have to witness Sean's reaction. By the time his son returned to Beckford that evening, Patrick's confession had been made in full. Sean came to visit him once, on remand. He doubted he would come again, which broke his heart, because everything he'd done, the stories he had told, and the life he had constructed, it was all for Sean.
Sean, I am not what I think I am. I am not who I thought I was. I was the child of a suicided mother and a good man. There were doubts, of course. My father told me that after my mother died I didn't speak for 3 days. But I had a memory of speaking to kind, sweet Jeannie Sage. Didn't I tell her how we'd gone to the river in the car together? I thought I remembered all three of us being in the car, but my father told me it was a nightmare. In the nightmare, I woke, and my father was shouting. My mother too, they were saying ugly things to one another. Her, failure, brute. Him, slut, whore. I heard a sharp sound, a slap, and then silence. I crept down the stairs. I heard a dog whimpering, but we don't have a dog. And then in the nightmare, we were all three of us in the car, me in the back, my mother in the passenger seat, slumped against the door. And then her head fell to one side and I could see her. I could see blood on her face. Her tongue lolled from her mouth. In the nightmare, she reached for me and touched my hand, and I was terrified. I pulled away. There was always a fault line there in me, between my understanding of what I knew had happened and the strange, slippery sense of wrongness. But the quake didn't come until I met Nell. At the beginning, she accepted the story I told her, but after Katie died, Nell changed. She started talking to Nicky Sage. She told me she believed my father had killed my mother, and the fault line widened. Odd visions returned to me. If I believed Nell's story, I was no longer the son of a suicided mother and a decent man. I was the son of a monster. And worse than that, I was the boy who watched his mother die and said nothing. The night Nell died, we were walking back from the cottage. She wanted so much for me to get to the truth. She was dizzy with drink and sex and renewed purpose. You need to remember it, she told me. You need to stand there and remember it, Sean, the way it happened. We stood at the top of the cliff looking down. I didn't see it from here, Nell, I said. I was in the trees below. She was on the edge of the cliff, her back to me. Did she cry out? She asked. I closed my eyes, and I saw my mother in the car, reaching out for me. I shrank back, but she kept coming at me, and I tried to push her away. With my hands in the small of Nell's back, I pushed her away.
Into the